This is Amie Potsic, and welcome to Art Watch on WCHE 95.3 FM, 1520 AM, and online at 953wche.com every Wednesday from 1 to 1:30. We bring you in-depth and behind-the-scenes interviews with artists and creative leaders shaping the local art scene to the international art world. I'm an artist, author, curator, and CEO of Amie Potsic Art Advisory. As an art advisor, I support collectors, artists, and institutions on curatorial projects, legacy planning, and AI. Thanks so much for joining us on Art Watch. Today we're speaking with Angela McQuillan, artist, curator, and owner of Chimera Gallery in Philadelphia, about her new solo show. Thanks so much for being here, Angela.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, let me introduce my guest. Angela McQuillan, a Philadelphia-based artist, designer, and curator, merges disciplines of art and science in her creative endeavors. With a BS in biology from the University of Texas at Austin, a BFA in painting and drawing from Tyler School of Art, and an MPS in business for art and design from Maryland Institute College of Art, Angela brings a unique perspective honed over 2 decades in scientific and creative exploration, spanning academia, pharmaceuticals, communications, marketing, and arts administration. For 9 years, she served as the curator of Esther Klein Gallery in Philadelphia, a role where she co-founded the University Science Center BioArt Residency in 2017 and spearheaded its direction for 5 years. Angela's curatorial projects have garnered recognition from the Knight Foundation, the Dolfinger McMahon Foundation, and the Pew Center for Arts and Heritage. With over 65 curated exhibitions under her belt, Angela is the proud owner of Chimera Gallery located in Philadelphia. Her artistic contributions have earned accolades and featured placements in publications including the New York Times, Forbes, and SciArt in America. Her solo exhibition, Roots of the Infinite Sky, is now on view at Chimera Gallery through November 22nd. So nice to have you here, Angela.
I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. So I am really excited to have a chance to learn more about your work as an artist and your new solo show. Mm-hmm. I have been impressed with your curatorial contributions for years, and I'm just now really expanding my knowledge on your personal artwork. So I so enjoyed your new exhibition where you combine multiple mediums to address the intersection of art, science, and consciousness. You had an incredible event the other night with a band, and it was packed house.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was an amazing event. So what has been your scientific and artistic training, and in what ways does that background continue to influence your creative process?
Sure. So I've always, really had an affinity for the arts ever since I was a kid. But when I, was deciding what to do when I go to college, my parents were both scientists, and I really spent most of my childhood being in a science lab, going to work with them on the weekends. I had a basic familiarity of the scientific process, so I decided to go to school for biology, which was great. And when I graduated, I was working in a lab. I was doing molecular biology, cancer research, but I felt like I was kind of missing something as well because I really loved the arts. So I went back to school and studied painting and drawing at Temple. Meanwhile, I was working in a lab during the day and going to school at night. So I would say I spent a lot of time during those years, looking under a microscope, working with mice in the lab, doing research on zebrafish. And one of my favorite things to do was to stain cells fluorescent colors and look at them under the microscope and take all these pictures. So I feel like just looking at the world on a microscopic level, kind of having, studying all these systems and processes that happen in a body and all the interdependencies, I think that way of seeing the world has never really left me, even though I don't do that anymore. Mm-hmm. So getting my BFA really allowed me to explore materials, visual language, and take, all the things I've been observing and use them creatively and kind of expand on those things.
Interesting, right? Because when I look at your work now, that explanation that you just said is so evident mm-hmm. in the way your shapes and forms mimic cell structures and sort of, I recently saw an incredible image of a human cell. It was the most detailed image of a human cell that they've ever created. It looks like your paintings.
Oh, really?
Yeah, literally.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I was like, when I was preparing for today, it made me think of that when I saw your show the other night. I was like, wow, you you both visually knew from looking at, under a microscope, but also intuitively sort of what our most complicated cell structures look like.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm glad that you can see that that relationship.
Oh, totally. So absolutely. So, as we're talking about, your work draws on biology, evolution, this delicate balance of mechanisms that sustain life. So how do you balance the data and research element that's interesting to you with the imagination and aesthetics that your art training brought you and that you've evolved over time?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say, I have these like two different ways that I do art. So one is curating, one is, creating it myself. I would say when I curate work, I am more attracted to very, data-driven art that's really based on like very specific scientific concepts. And when I create my own work, mine is a little bit more intuitive, just because that's kind of just my creative process. But I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, science does have obviously a lot of data, a lot of facts, a lot of, kind of like a systematic approach. And then there's also the emotional way of kind of appreciating all the things that happen in the world. And I think that's kind of, when I've collaborated with scientists, that's the duality that we have. Like, that's artists bring the emotional connection to the table. But I would say when I create my own work, research is kind of like the starting point. And I'll use this as an example. I did a residency at the University of Pennsylvania 2 years ago. Some of the paintings in the show are from that, when I worked with some medical students and got to kind of follow them around and see what they were working on. And one particular study that I really got interested in was a study on genetics and how mental health and addiction are all kind of tied up in your genes, and how they're trying to like personalize medicine in order to treat very specific mental health disorders and see how they all connect to each other. So I started out by like reading the paper, and then really trying to, I like to look at diagrams. I like to get the data and kind of understand the logic of it. But then once I understand that, I kind of let intuition take over, and I'm more trying to express a feeling, or express, like, if you close your eyes and imagine this happening, kind of coming up with a different way of seeing it. Like, for example, in these paintings, they were about DNA, but I didn't paint DNA because that's too, I don't know. It's
explanatory,
exactly.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think data kind of provides the structure of what I'm doing, and then aesthetics kind of is the ultimate goal.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because you started the residency at Esther Klein Gallery, and it's so interesting because as a scientist and artist, you could see, okay, here's what the scientists can bring to the table and what they cannot. Here's what the artists bring to the table and cannot.
Exactly.
Usually you can do both, but most people aren't able to do that.
Yeah.
So I remember seeing some exhibitions from the artists you had in your residency programs there, and it was fascinating to see how they interpreted the scientific work that they were exposed to.
Definitely. And I also think it's very interesting. I've done a couple of projects that combine artists and scientists, and it's interesting how many scientists are also artists. In their free time or whatever. So I think that they're both very creative professions. They just take different approaches.
Absolutely. I did a panel discussion a couple of years ago with a show that I did on my work, which was on deforestation, climate change. And we had a panel of scientists who were working actually with coral. And they have all of this incredible data. And they were like, thank you. Like, we are so bad at translating this to the general public.
Yes.
They were just like, we have all this data, we know what it means, but we're really not good at communicating that. And like, artists help us make it approachable.
Yeah.
And so people can really get beyond the like, I don't get the science of it, to like, what's really the point?
Exactly. And I think that's so important. And that's actually what a lot of my curatorial work is about, really communicating, important relevant topics, like viruses. That was a very important thing to discuss the last 5 years. And I think that science isn't exciting to the common person if it's in a scientific paper. It's more exciting if you can engage with it in a video or in a piece of art or performance piece. Like, there's all different ways.
Absolutely. My son's taking a high-level chemistry class right now, and it's all experiments. And literally they're blowing things up in class. He's having that comes over from school like, we totally had an explosion in class today. I was like, well, I guess that's why you wear the glasses. He's like, literally. So, and he's just so much more engaged. Like, absolutely. It's just like a delight to see that. And so your visual art, sculpture, painting, fiber works, emphasizes interconnectedness, the idea that no phenomenon exists in isolation. And so how does that worldview reveal itself in your visual language and the use of more than one medium? Because your show that you have right now is fiber and sculpture and ceramics and painting. So how does this all come together?
So I would say, I've always been influenced by the phrase "as above, so below." I don't know where it comes from. It might be like Hermetic, I don't know, some kind of very old expression.
Right.
But it really, to me, expresses the idea that, like, the microcosm and macrocosm kind of mirror one another. And I think in this sense, in philosophy, it's also described as, like, heaven and earth. They kind of mirror each other as well, and all of these things. But the way that I see that is, like, structures in the earth, structures in the body, structures in the cosmos. They're all very similar patterns. Like, tree branches and roots kind of mirror our veins and our arteries.
Exactly.
And that, none of these systems really exist in isolation. We're all connected. And when one thing happens in the cosmos, it affects people on Earth. And, it's just mind-blowing to really kind of think about that and understand that. But I think, I like to use multiple mediums because I'm kind of a maximalist in my aesthetics. Like, I just like lots of colors and textures.
Yes.
But I think also it kind of conveys complexity, which that's the way I see the world. Very complex. And it's kind of like chaos. It has to be organized and studied. And that's kind of how I see science. So, and I also really think that I'm trying to sort of reveal these invisible threads that link different systems together. Like, biology is related to consciousness, and it's related to our environment, and all of these things are just very connected.
Right. I think it's interesting how the way you think about your work and your work itself really melds sort of philosophy, science, spirituality, because we tend to silo all of these things in our culture and our educational system, academia. Everything is like absolutely separate, and science and spirituality together, consciousness.
I know.
Like, oh my gosh, God forbid,
it's taboo.
Literally. Not so much anymore, which is really nice to see. There's also a lot of studies that really are delving into that connection, which I think when we evolve through the research a little more, that kind of interconnectedness will be undeniable, and I think that will change, honestly, our ethics, our empathy, the way that we deal with each other, but also how we deal with systems and technology and really everything. So we just stop acting like the Earth is flat, and like nothing's connected. I feel like we're kind of in that pre-imaging of the round Earth stage with consciousness. Do you know what I mean? Like, where it's like, but logically it feels flat, but it's not. And so I think that while we logically feel separate and we see things as like that, object over there is not me, like on an atomic level, everything's made of the same substance.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So that blows my mind. And I feel like your work really sort of addresses that. But I love the word you use, maximalist. I love it. Because it's like, that is exactly what your work is.
Lots of patterns, every color you can imagine.
Totally. Very colorful and like big and sort of dramatic. And I love, it's not in the show, but the chairs that you did, the sort of yarn
at the airport.
Covered chairs at the airport were really, really cool too. So I love that term. Well, I want to talk more about your work. So we're going to take a short break. So stay with us. We'll be right back with more Art Watch. Welcome back to Art Watch. I'm Amie Potsic, and we're talking with artist and curator Angela McQuillan about her solo show on view at Chimera Gallery through November 22nd. So we were talking about your current show, Roots of the Infinite Sky, and it maps connections between natural landscapes, the cosmos, interior states of mind. And so how do you weave these realms together visually and translate these phenomena into the gallery experience itself? Like, how do you feel? What do you experience in the gallery in the show?
Yeah. So a lot of these works were created when I was doing a lot of like yoga, where they're kind of like about meditation, but also I'm thinking about it from a standpoint of like yoga and meditation are kind of like a mind-body connection. So there's certain paintings that have images of like mountains and landscapes, but they're not realistic. They're very imagined, and I kind of imagined those images as like, when you're meditating or when you're kind of trying to put yourself into a calm space and you close your eyes, where are you going? So that's kind of where that imagery came from. And then I connect that sort of to mysticism and spirituality because I used a lot of dot motifs. And, first of all, I'm very influenced by Yayoi Kusama, who's an artist, very famous, who uses that as a way to like calm her anxiety.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also, I grew up in Australia, and my very first gallery experience in the 80s, my parents took me to an Aboriginal art gallery that was like contemporary Aboriginal art, and they use a lot of these dot motifs, and a lot of their paintings are about mythology and spiritual, events. The dreaming is what it's called.
Right.
And so I kind of found like my visual language to kind of go to all these places through those motifs. But then also there's things that look like cells, which also look like dots. So you're kind of
right.
And then I have other paintings that are talking about genetics, and so you have similar visual motifs, kind of like beads on a string, which really represent like your genes. So I kind of used all of these motifs to tie everything together. And like I said earlier, like all of these structures and patterns kind of mirror each other on different scales in the world and in your mind. But my goal with this show is to kind of create a space where people felt kind of grounded, but also expansive and like aware of their imagination, aware of all these interesting processes that are happening in their environment and inside of their bodies, and also generate like a sense of curiosity for the unknown and for all of the, the things we know about science as well.
Right. Well, it's interesting because nothing looks directly like, oh, that's a scientific influence at all, but if you know your background, you absolutely can see that. It's also just so fun and colorful and sort of magical shapes that do seem to come from like a Seussian kind of, imagination, which I absolutely adore, and I think too, the way you've placed some of the large fiber-based works that are these sort of maybe 5 by 6 feet, like pretty large, kind of up high and in unusual spots that they're not just sort of central at eye level on the wall. I think that kind of engages the space in a really interesting way.
Yeah, definitely.
And then also the sculptural pieces in the sort of squares that you
like
have
on the shelves.
On the shelves, yeah. Those are really curious and cool.
Thank you.
Right? They're soft, they're hard, they're ceramic, they're fiber.
It was sort of representing a body in a way, like a skeleton that's full of soft organs, or I don't know. I mean, I think you hit it when you said it's kind of playful and magical, because that's the way I see science, really. I mean, there's always something weird and wacky that you see under a microscope, or you see under the ocean. The world is full of these really crazy looking organisms, which I find so exciting. And
Absolutely.
I was hoping to kind of bring some of that to
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah, it has a whimsy to it. But a depth, like you're feeling all these different influences, but none of them looks literal, which is so nice. So you're also owner and director of Chimera Gallery, and you were curator of Esther Klein Gallery before that. Mm-hmm. So you focused on art and the intersection of science, nature, technology, curating over 65 exhibitions, which I want to say is a lot, engaging these principles.
Yeah.
How does curating in these spaces, these galleries, and this kind of subject matter affect your own artistic practice, and then vice versa, sort of the artistic and the curatorial influencing each other?
Yeah, I would say being a curator is so interesting because every artist I work with has a completely different approach and, completely different practice. So I would say, depending on what artist I'm working with at the time, I'll start dabbling in, glass blowing or just whatever the artists are into. I'm like, wow, this is so exciting. But I also feel like I learn so much from the way that other people kind of research concepts and kind of talk through them with me. I find that very exciting. And I think curating keeps me really intellectually energized because sometimes as an artist you have ruts where you don't know what to make next or what to focus on. And I think just having this influx of creative people constantly sharing ideas with me, it's so much fun. Mm-hmm. And I think, yeah, definitely I would say it helps me approach my work in a different way. I would say there's always a new concept I'm exploring that's sort of influenced by artists I'm working with, but not directly. Right. I guess you could say.
Yeah. Yeah, they spark your interest in new avenues.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I am a curator and artist as well, and I find that same dynamic where working with other artists is energizing and exciting, and I always learn from them and then find some spark of interest that's not directly, related to their work specifically, but it sort of gives me a new trail to think about. And I think that's maybe part of your multiple medium and like feeling comfortable doing that as one artist, because I do the same thing.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I think like we're so used to working with artists who do these different mediums that we're more comfortable with these mediums than people who really just do like stay in their lane with their one medium, or they feel like, who am I to do that medium? Or they don't necessarily know strategies for exhibiting that kind of other medium. Mm-hmm. So I definitely found that like that was expansive for me.
That's a good point, because when I do studio visits, artists will most of the time show me how they create their work and show me, for example, I worked with the glass artist and she took me and showed me how she uses her kiln and uses her grinder, and she had all this equipment. So, like, now I kind of, not that I know how to make that stuff, but I feel much more familiar if I was to go create something like that. Yeah.
Well, it's like you have the vocabulary that you wouldn't have, the same way you have a scientific vocabulary that you can bring to bear, because I definitely feel different when I'm, like, talking with my photography people, like, photo's kind of a ghetto. There's like a language, and it's like a mindset, It's totally different when you open that up into contemporary art outside, including photography. Mm-hmm. But when you're just in the photo world, it's a very particular kind of way of thinking. Yeah. Even in grad school, I took the photo critiques, but I also took what was called new genres at the time.
Oh, interesting.
Which was basically
that like
everything.
Media?
It was like basically, like new media and any performance art, like anything that didn't fit into the other categories.
Cool.
And what was great is everybody did something radically different in there. So like no one knew the history of photography in that class. Like no one knew about proper printing or any of that. Yeah. So they never talked about that, which was great. It was a completely broad discussion. But then I could go to the photo critique and really get like a very specific, knowledgeable critique about that medium. Mm-hmm. So it was just interesting. So I think I see that wonderful sort of expansion in your own work. And also like your fluidity of curating different people who work in different mediums. Like you have worked with so many artists I admire and like seen so many great shows in both of your galleries. It's just been like a delight to see your work, both curatorially and personally. And so you've sort of decided that you're going to have a new chapter in moving on from Chimera Gallery. So what's on the horizon for you?
Yeah, so I've been curating for like the past 15 years, and I've also been making my own work, but, you know, curating was kind of the way that I was making a living, paying the bills, so that really took precedence. And I feel like during all of this time, I love to make art, but it's kind of been on the back burner. Mm-hmm. So I'd really love to spend some time, I don't know how long, maybe a few months, I'm not sure, just kind of like focusing on my own studio practice.
Yeah.
That's something I really need for myself. But, you know, I'm never one to not have a project on the horizon. So right. I'm sure there will be something else soon. For now, I just feel like, you know, I have been doing a lot of multitasking for a really long time, and I need to kind of pare it down for sanity for a while. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and your work will thank you for that. Yeah. Because then you can sort of distill all of this into your own practice, mm-hmm. right? And then be sort of stronger in that when you do whatever additional next things. Yeah, and something I really admire about some of the artists I've worked with are that some artists spend so much time on their practice, and that's why they're so good. So. No, literally. Absolutely. I mean, there's no replacement for daily grind mm-hmm. on whatever you do. Exactly. And I don't mean that grind in a bad way, just I mean like in that like it's an everyday / 5 to days a week kind of a practice. And I'm sort of there with you in that like I do a lot of different things with a lot of different people, and when I do just my own practice, it's a completely different thing and called for. Right? And I do have some artists I work with who have such a meditative, committed daily kind of practice, and seeing them grow in that is really wonderful. And I see the value in that so much. It depends. Every artist is different, like what that looks like. It doesn't necessarily mean sitting in your studio every day, because you can be creative not in your studio. Or something. Yeah. It's just really like sort of something related to your own practice. So I'm so happy for you that that's what I was like hoping that's what you're going to say, so that, you could take all of this and kind of devote it to yourself. Yeah. And I think it's important to have time to experiment. Yeah, absolutely. That's a perfect time right after you have a big solo show, because then no one's like, oh, what are you doing next? Although they still do, and I just asked you that, but at least you're free for a little bit, right? Yeah. Well, it's such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much. Great to speak to you too. Thank you for having me. Oh, you're welcome. So to learn more about Angela's work, go to her website, which is angelamcquillan.com, and to learn more about her current exhibition at Chimera Gallery on view through November 22nd, go to chimeragallery.com. And join us on Wednesdays on Art Watch from 1 to 1:30 p.m. Eastern on WCHE 95.3 FM and 1520 AM. Recent podcasts of Art Watch can be found on 95.3 WCHE.com, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. You can also find the podcast of this episode and more information on my guest at amiepotsicartadvisory.com. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next week.